Like, we have the word everyone uses, Iliad and the Odyssey. The Iliad is about the war, the Trojan War. I think there was a movie, I didn't see it, but there was a movie quite recently about that. And then the Odyssey is about the travels of Ulysses from that war in Troy back to his home. So these were considered very great and very large literatures, but when Western scholars came in contact with the epic literature of India, and the two great epics are Mahabharata and Ramayana, then they were amazed, because these books were so much bigger in volume. And then these are only two works of the total Vedic, say, encyclopedia. So it's a very, very, very great literature, and one could not study all of the Vedas unless one was a genius. You could not study all of this literature in one life. So therefore, one starts to think, well, this is great knowledge, but how to understand the essence of it? So therefore, Veda plus Anta, we get Vedanta. The word Anta means end or conclusion, the point. So this is the study of what we are really supposed to learn from all this Vedic literature. This is focusing on that, the conclusion, what we have to do in our life to live out this knowledge, this Vedic knowledge. So that's what Vedanta is all about. We could say simply it is the philosophy of the Vedic scriptures. And of course, the great religion known in India as Hindology, in the real sense of the word, the real, true, original sense. Because psychology comes from Greek, and the word psyche in Greek means soul. Now in the West, they use this term psychology, talking about the mind, or maybe some schools of psychology don't even really care about the mind so much, it's more about behavior, you see. But anyway, they don't deal with the soul. So, but the word psychology indicates that we have a soul. So Vedanta psychology is about that. It also includes the mind and also includes behavior. But the starting point is spiritual. So now I want to go right into this topic, starting with the soul. Now unfortunately, usually when I give these talks, there's like a blackboard. And I can... Okay. Well, I should do this before because it takes time. Anyway, to save time, because our time is actually limited, I'll just... I have already made something here. I can show you this now. But anyway, I'll just try to speak in a way that hopefully is very clear so you can understand. So the Vedas say that our spiritual nature, that ultimate nature of our self, is transcendental, which means it is not material. So our identity, when we refer to me, I, that I goes beyond this physical body and even goes beyond what we call the subtle body, or some say the astral body, the mind, linga sharira in Sanskrit. This is something like outer clothes and underclothes. So the self even goes beyond the mind. The self is not material at all. It is eternal. And it is part, a tiny part, of a supreme self, a supreme spiritual entity, which Vedanta calls the Paramatma. Paramatma means simply supreme soul. So we are Hare Krishna people. When you hear us use this word Krishna, Krishna is a name of that supreme soul, that supreme conscious being. And so we can give the example of the sun. Streaming out of the sun are so many rays of light, and science today says these light beams are made up of tiny units of light called photons. So we are like photons, and the Paramatma is like the sun. And we come out of the Paramatma. We have the same quality. The sun's quality is that of light, and we have the same quality. We are also light, but the sun is great, and we are very small. So Vedanta psychology says that the basis of the body and the mind is this relationship, this eternal, unbroken relationship between the Paramatma, the Supreme Consciousness, and we can say the local Atma, you and me, the individual soul. And this is all in the transcendental dimension. So how is it that we come to be in this material world and be in this body and even be thinking perhaps this is all we can know? Don't talk to us about the supreme being or soul, because that's beyond everything. Yes, so this is a very deep subject, how this came to be. So there is a relationship between Atma and Paramatma. It is actually a personal relationship. And in a relationship, we have a choice. We can choose to positively relate to another person, relate as a friend, or we can negatively relate. We can choose to ignore or become against that person. So this is the power that we have as soul. So some of us, out of all the countless souls that are streaming out of the Paramatma, some of us have made that choice to turn away from the Paramatma and turn away from our own spiritual nature. Turn away from what we are. So the result of that is that we come into a kind of ignorance. And this ignorance, this is a little technical to explain. I don't know. I don't want to get too much into it. But I just want to stress that there is a very clear explanation. It's not a mystery from how this Maya comes up. It's all happening within consciousness. And to give an example from our own experience, that if we become, let us say, very hateful to another person, very envious of that person, then we get all kinds of bad thoughts that come up in our mind. We may even imagine in our mind killing that person, or wishing that something very bad would happen to that person. These kind of images come up in the mind. And if we meditate on them long enough, they can become real, you see. Focusing on such a bad image long enough, it will finally drag us into trying to make that idea real. So if in consciousness we want to be independent, we don't want to know about this relationship that we have with God, with Paramatma, then the idea comes up of a separate existence. And we're attracted to that idea, we become absorbed in it, and then it becomes actually concrete. So Vedanta psychology says that this whole material world, the whole universe, is actually coming out of consciousness. And this is, of course, a big switch. Because in the Western world, everyone is in schools, everyone is learning the assumption, it's an assumption, that consciousness comes out of matter. That the first thing is matter, and then awareness, consciousness, life comes out of matter. But Vedanta says the exact opposite. Consciousness is first. Life is first. And then from out of that is coming matter. So the matter comes out subtle in the form of mind energy, and then gross in the form of what we call physical energy, like the body, like the table. These are two phases of matter, material energy. Now, what is this matter in essence? Because I said it is coming out of consciousness. In essence, it is a Sanskrit word avidya, or ignorance. It is an ignorance of reality, an ignorance of what we really are, an ignorance of our source, which is the Paramatma. But this ignorance takes specific forms. So, we want to talk about the mind, this aspect of matter, and it's very interesting to see that in this Vedanta psychology, which is of course very, very ancient, goes back thousands of years to very ancient Sanskrit texts, this presents a very, very sophisticated picture or schema of the mind. The mind is presented as having a surface. This is our surface awareness, the mind that we're all familiar with, the mind in which we have our thoughts, we make our plans, we have our perceptions of the world. But then there's like a, shall we say, a basement to the mind, an underground called the subconscious. And this whole thing together, you can picture it as an iceberg. So an iceberg, what you see on the surface of the water, is also very big. In fact, I heard a few years ago that an iceberg broke off of the Antarctic ice shelf at the bottom of the world, the South Pole. It broke off and went drifting off into the ocean, and the authorities, shipping authorities around the world were very alarmed because their ships sail these different routes and go, beneath South America, near Antarctica. They were very worried about this iceberg. Why? Because its surface size was as big as the country Belgium. And so that's very big. We can't imagine. We can't imagine an iceberg of that. But that's only 1/8 of the size. You see, underneath the water is the greater portion of the ice, seven times bigger than what's on top. So this is the way the mind is. That we have our surface mind, which is of course very complicated. And Western psychology is mainly dealing with that. What the mind that we're aware of. But we have this subconscious, which is even much greater. So the surface mind, in Sanskrit, linga sharira, our subtle body, and the subconscious in Sanskrit, karana deha, the causal body. Because the subconscious is actually the cause of what's happening in our conscious mind. Now, all of that subconscious and conscious mind, that is the, let us say, the circle, the great circle of conditioning of consciousness. Conditioning of our soul's original consciousness. Now, what do I mean by conditioning? This is a term that we have Sanskrit words for. Conditioning. And in modern psychology, there's also this term, conditioning. And the famous experiment to show what conditioning is was done by a Russian scientist just about 100 years ago, I think it was, 1904, I believe that's the date. So this is the centenary anniversary of the experiments of Dr. Ivan Pavlov. You've all heard, I think, about Pavlov's dogs. And this is the experiment that shows us what conditioning is. So you probably all know, I'll just go over it very briefly. He would bring food to these dogs, and at the same time as the food was being put before them, a bell would ring. And after a while, he would only ring the bell and not bring the food, but the dogs would react in the same way. You know, they would salivate as if food was before them. And this is called a conditioned reflex. So what conditioning means is that we react to something that will not actually give us satisfaction, but we react to it as if it would. So in Vedanta psychology, that thing that we're reacting to as if it will give us satisfaction, that is this maya, or this illusion of, yes, the material world, this material body, our material mind. We think that in this we will find the happiness that we want. Because the soul is, as I said, coming out of Paramatma, and the nature of Paramatma is called Anandamaya, full of bliss, full of transcendental happiness. And that's the kind of happiness that satisfies us. It has to be of our same nature, eternal and unending. But because we want to be independent of that Paramatma, so then we actually settle for something else. We accept something else to be happiness. But that will not make us happy. That something else is Maya, the illusion that is born out of ignorance. So this is the meaning of conditioning. That this Maya, this material energy, material world, cannot satisfy us, but we're here because we think it will. And we become very attached. It's like, you can think in terms of addiction. A person starts to take some drug. You can become addicted to smoking, or to drinking, or to what they call hard drugs like heroin. Why does this start? Because they're thinking, I'll become happy. They're thinking to smoke cigarettes, it's cool, you see. Their other friends are doing it at a young age, so this boy takes it up. And of course the initial experience is very bad, but they want to do it. You see, they have a strong desire to do it, so they keep doing it, and they get used to it, and then they like it. They think, yeah, this is very good. I like the taste. But this is not bringing real happiness, because everyone knows now that smoking causes all kinds of severe diseases. It's an addiction in reality. One thinks that they like it, and it's taking hold of us, and then we can't give it up, or it's very hard to give up. So this is the same we see in alcohol addiction or heroin addiction. That thing we're addicted to will not make us happy, actually will make us suffer. But we're so attached to it, we convince ourselves, no, this is happiness. So it is the same in our relationship with matter. We become addicted to it, and we don't want to give it up. So therefore the soul has become very attached to life in this body and in this mind. So, yes, we are conditioned. And in terms of psychology, the conditioning manifests as the conscious mind, the aware surface mind, and the subconscious mind. So now I want to talk about the conscious mind. I've made a diagram here. Simple thing, a triangle. And this helps us to understand the aspects of the conscious mind according to Vedanta. So there are three corners in a triangle, and I've labeled them T, F, and W. T means thinking. So in modern psychology, there's this term cognitive, the cognitive function of the mind. That's equivalent to thinking, cognitive. I chose thinking because it's a simpler word. Cognitive is what the psychologists use. So in this part of the mind, the thinking part of the mind, we have our perceptions of the world that come through our senses. And we have what in Sanskrit is called anuman, or reason, our reasoning. This is going on in this corner of the mind. And so how do we perceive? Well, I mentioned already, through our senses. We also perceive through logic. There's another kind of perception. Much of Western science is based on that perception. Like when they talk about electrons, you see, that the electricity in these lights is coming in streams of electrons. But nobody has ever seen an electron. And it's not likely that we'll ever be able to see them because they're so very, very small. But we use this word electron and we think of electrons as tiny particles or whatever. Actually, science says that's incorrect really to think of them as anything. Anything we have experience of. But we have some idea of an electron, although we've never seen it. Why is that? Because it's logical. Because through science, it can be shown that something's there, and it seems to be like a particle or something. So, give it a name, electron. Nobody's ever seen it. So this is perceiving through logic. Or if you're in your room and your door is closed and someone knocks on the door and calls your name, you hear the voice, you know the voice, you don't see the person, but by logic you know, this is my friend. Not necessarily, could be someone else with a tape recorder who's recorded your friend saying, hey, can you come to the door? But most often it is your friend. So it's a valid perception. In English we say in the mind's eye. You can see things in the mind's eye, not with these eyes. So these are two kinds of perception. We have also in this thinking part, thinking corner, intuition. Intuition is a special gift given to us by the Paramatma. And by this intuition, some amazing things can happen. Some people have precognitive, we call precognitive visions or precognitive dreams. They can see into the future. And this has been verified that sometimes this happens. Also in the thinking part of the mind, there's the memory. So then we go up from there to the top point, F, for feeling. In psychology of today, they use the word affective, the affective function of the mind. We have the word affection. We show affection towards another person. That means emotions. So the feeling or emotion, feeling or affective phase of the mind is all about emotions. And then over here, W for willing. And modern psychology uses the word cognitive. So our mind functions by going through these phases. For example, you get an idea comes in your head here, in the thinking phase, and you continue to think about that idea. Let's say it's an idea to go out and get an ice cream. You see, the idea comes. I have time. There's a nice ice cream shop nearby. I have money in my pocket. I could go get an ice cream. So that's in the mind. You think about it, and then it brings you to the feeling stage. You actually already in the mind can visualize the ice cream, how it tastes. You start to get very attached to the idea. And then it becomes a desire. You start feeling a hunger. Yes, I really want to get this ice cream. And then that feeling, it draws you to actually act it out. Willing. You get up and you go outside to that shop and buy the ice cream and eat it. So this is basically how the surface mind is working. Then Vedanta psychology is teaching us that for each of these corners there are star qualities. That's the term I'm using. Star qualities. So that are to be developed by the person. And of course in the Vedic culture there was a specific means to develop these qualities. The means is yoga. I think you've all heard that word. Yoga means a discipline. a life discipline by which one can achieve a higher consciousness. So the star quality in our thinking is discrimination, or in Sanskrit, viveka. And that means simply to be able to see the difference between truth and illusion, right and wrong, good and evil. In everything, in all fields of knowledge, that's basically what we're doing. Here in this university, different subjects are being taught, like literature or history or science. But in essence, what the students are learning is to distinguish between, say, real science and false science. To distinguish what is real literature and what is not literature, what is real history, what is not history. So this is the star quality for the thinking side, discrimination. Then for the feeling side, the star quality is love. And this is love that goes up to the Platonic sense of love. Platonic love is ultimately dealing with the soul. That whom we should love is the eternal person, the eternal entity or identity. So this is cultivated through yoga, and in bhakti yoga, which we practice, that love is the ultimate object of love is that same Paramatma I was telling you about before, God, Krishna, and from Him all the souls are coming. So if we can have a loving relationship with Him, then we will have also a loving relationship with all of those beings that are coming from Him. And then over here, on the willing side, the star quality is honesty. That in our actions, we should be honest. First of all, we should act according to our own capacity. We should not try to be something that we're not. You see, putting on a false show for other people that I'm a great this or a great that. In actual fact, we're all, if we look at ourselves spiritually, we're all very small. Vedanta teaches that the soul is a tiny spark of consciousness. So to think I'm the great, I'm the best, I am God is dishonest. And we are always servants. We're not masters. If you look at your life honestly, you'll see that in everything we do, we're serving. We're serving the urges of our body and our mind. We're serving old age, disease, and death. We're serving our senses. When the tongue says, give me something nice to eat, we have to do that. In society, in our relationships with others, our position is always servant. Even when we think that we're very great and we're, masters, then we're just serving our ego, you see. Because that is also kind of service. If you want to present yourself as a great person or a very beautiful person, then there's so many things you have to do, services that you have to do to maintain that image, you see. Understand what I'm saying? You have to dress in a certain way and act in a certain way. You always have to remember things. It's very... I once saw a movie many, many years ago of a kind of foolish fellow who's pretending... it was actually a real film. It was not a fictional film. A kind of clown person, comic. He went... This was in Germany. The fall in the city of Munich, they have this what's called Oktoberfest. Everyone comes into Munich city and they drink beer all night and come to big tents and have a good time, sing songs. And there's a lot of heavy characters who gather there. So this comic figure, he went to this Oktoberfest dressed as a policeman. And he went with a camera following him. So they just wanted to see what would happen. And he's a comic character, so he went there without shoes. Everything else, he was dressed as a policeman, but he was barefoot. And so he was going into the tent where all these heavy guys are drinking beer. And they saw him and they were very respectful. Oh, policeman's here. They're on their good behavior. And then he started to eat from the table. He was picking up these pretzels and eating them. And that was a bit strange for a policeman to do, but they still didn't dare to do anything. He's a policeman. And he was even eating off their plates. And then they were thinking, this is really weird, but they still didn't know what to do. Finally, one of them looked and saw, he doesn't have shoes. And then they realized, oh, he's not a policeman. So they began to beat him. And the camera was filming all this. So this is what I mean. That when you want to put on an image of being an important person, then you have to have all the components in order. You see, if you want to be a policeman, then you have to wear shoes. So this is a service, you see. So we're actually servants. So, therefore, honesty is the best quality in our activity. So this is the surface mind. Now, if we had only this, our surface mind, then I think our lives would be a lot simpler. Because surface mind we can put into order. You know, this is the idea of reason or rationalism, that you get all your thoughts and feelings and perceptions in order. But that's not all there is to the mind. We have this subconscious. And the subconscious is largely manifesting through this part, feelings, emotions. This is a very large opening to the subconscious, and therefore, of these three, you see, I put the feeling part on top, because we are ruled in our thoughts, in our activities, by our feelings, and this is simply a truth of human nature. You know, human beings, sometimes we like to, you know, especially if you're going to university, there's some pride of being an intelligent person. Some people like to think of themselves as intellectuals, and they hope to live their life according to ideas, but really nobody does that, nobody can do that. Behind all of our ideas and our ideals are feelings, and that's a fact. And you can see this it's very plain in politics, for example. And different political parties, they have their ideals, their programs, which are all thought up from reason, but what's behind them are feelings, emotional values. So then beyond the feelings, behind the feelings, is the subconscious mind, which I said is the greater part of our mind. Now Vedanta psychology says the subconscious is the storehouse of all of our desires. And when we speak of desires, we're talking about, this brings in the subject of samsara or reincarnation. Because throughout this universe there are many different forms of life. Vedanta doesn't say only on this planet, but there are many other planets, and on these different planets there are life forms. And the souls move around the universe, taking birth in these different forms of life. And why are they doing this? It's because of the so many desires. So there are desires in us, inside of the subconscious, that are best acted out. Not best acted out, but I mean they can be acted out much greater, in a much more large way than we can act them out in the human form. For example, if one is very fond of sleeping and thinks the best way to spend the day is to sleep the whole day, but the human body is not so suited for that. You see, you have to get up. You can't sleep very long. Maybe 12 hours, 14 hours, but then sooner or later you have to get up. But if you had a bare body, some creature like that, you could sleep for 6 months. You see? So that's a desire, like the desire just to sleep and sleep and sleep. And that comes up through our feelings. And if we really become attached to such a thing, then that attachment will, if it's prominent in the mind, then at the time of death it will lead us to another body that is more appropriate for satisfying that kind of desire. So this is why the soul is moving from body to body, to satisfy its desires, which are all stored in the subconscious. So what it means is that subconsciousness holds the potential for all the millions and millions of life forms. Because in every kind of life form, desires are being acted out. Different kinds of, even in something as small as a virus. A virus is a very interesting kind of thing. That generally it's just inert, floating through space, but when it comes near another cell, a living cell, then it attaches itself to that cell. And all it wants to do is multiply. So it injects some chemical into the cell, the living cell, and then that cell becomes a factory for producing more of those same kinds of viruses. And that cell is destroyed when it is taken over by a virus. It just produces millions and millions of more viruses, and this is how these viral diseases spread in the body. So unless the virus is attached to a cell and doing this work of multiplication, when the virus is just floating through the air, it's not doing anything. You don't see any, it just looks like a molecule or something. It doesn't show any signs of being alive. So you see, that's just one desire, it seems, that the virus has, to multiply and in the process destroy another cell. And in the human form of life, we have access to so many, many desires that we can act out. So, this is all in the subconscious. The desires flow from the subconscious into the conscious mind. And also in the subconscious are what is called samskaras. Samskaras, the word samskara means impression. So we have so many impressions or deeply buried memories, not only from this life, but from our past lives. They're all stored in the subconscious. And these also act on our conscious mind. I am sometimes asked about this phenomena. It's given a French name, déjà vu, where people suddenly have the impression that they have been at a place before. They don't remember having been there before. They come to a new city and walk down the street, and suddenly they have this strange feeling. I know this place, but I was never here before in my life. So that's the mind is associating. The conscious surface mind is associating this impression with something that is already buried in the subconscious mind. There's a connection somehow. Doesn't necessarily mean that he was actually in that place in a previous life. But somehow there's at least an association with some buried memory. And it makes it seem to be very familiar. So these samskaras are there. As I said, the trail of samskaras takes us back to all of our previous lifetimes. So the subconscious mind is, in a sense, controlling the conscious mind through the feelings. And we are forced to act on our feelings, thinking, coming into the mind as thoughts and feelings and so on. We're forced to act on these desires. And in this way we're forced to generate karma. Karma means there are reactions to what we do. And this is the mechanics of birth and death. The mind is forcing us to do things in the body, and the body in doing things is acting in terms of greater nature, and there's a law that governs greater nature called the law of karma. And so by our activities now, we are creating a future for ourselves. So Vedanta psychology is teaching all of this, so as we can see a way to end this cycle of birth and death. That we don't have to go acting simply on our urges coming up from the subconscious. That we can act in a transcendental way, spiritual way. And so the way to do this is to redevelop our relationship with the Paramatma, with Krishna, and realize again that I'm not matter, I'm not the mind, I'm not the body, but I'm pure soul, and as pure soul I have an eternal loving relationship with the Supreme Soul, and in this relationship there is the bliss, the happiness that I really want. So in our Krishna consciousness movement, the specific way in which we cultivate this, we revive this relationship with the Paramatma, and in this process realize ourselves as being non-material. The specific process is chanting mantra. Mantra is a spiritual sound which cleanses consciousness of this ignorance. So, of course, we have made the Hare Krishna mantra famous in this world. That's called the Maha Mantra, the great mantra for the deliverance of the soul from illusion. And this again is yoga. This is a mantra yoga, bhakti yoga, which is a discipline aimed at purifying consciousness. So that is the end point of the Vedanta psychology. So I've explained many things. What's the time now?
Yeah, we have 50 minutes.
Yes.
So we have to.
Okay. So that's a good time.
From here.
I've explained many things to you now. So I think it's a good point to stop. And then in the last 15 minutes, if you have, thank you. If you have questions, we can deal with those questions. Yes?
See where we start now. Very question.
Okay.
So you know that it's desire that keep us away from melting into the Supreme Consciousness. So the moment the desires start to exist, we connect to the Supreme Consciousness. So.
Okay. I will repeat the question so everyone can hear it. The question is that it's desires that keep us out of the Supreme Consciousness, and the moment the desires cease to exist, then we are in the Supreme Consciousness. So that question can be answered simply